Unidentified. My Top UFO Cases by Hector V. Bello, March 2018. The 1980 Rendlesham Forest UFO incident in the United Kingdom. In late December 1980, there was a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights near Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, England, which have become linked with claims of UFO landings. The event occurred just outside of RAF Woodbridge, which was used at the time by the United States Air Force personnel, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Halt, claimed to see things they described as a UFO sighting. The occurrence is the most famous of claimed UFO events to have happened in the United Kingdom, ranking among the best known reported UFO events worldwide. It has been compared to the Roswell UFO incident in the United States and is sometimes referred to as Britain's Roswell. The Ministry of Defense, MOD, stated the event posed no threat to national security, and it therefore never was investigated as a security matter. Eventually, by scientific skeptic Brian Dunning and science and astronomy writer Ian Ridpath, concluded that the UFO reports were due to misinterpretations of nocturnal lights, a fireball, the Alfredness Lighthouse, and bright stars. Main events, 26 December. Around 3 a.m. on 26 December 1980, reported as the 27th by Halt in his memo to the UK Ministry of Defence, a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge saw lights apparently descending into nearby Rendlesham Forest. These lights have been attributed by astronomers to a piece of natural debris seen burning up as a fireball over southern England. At that time, servicemen initially thought it was a downed aircraft, but upon entering the forest to investigate, they saw, according to Halt's memo, what they described as a glowing object, metallic in appearance, with colored lights. As they attempted to approach the object, it appeared to move through the trees. The animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. One of the servicemen, Sergeant Jim Peniston, later claimed to have encountered a craft of unknown origin while in the forest, although there was no publicized mention of this at the time, and there is no corroboration from other witnesses. Shortly after 4 a.m., local police were called to the scene, but reported that the only lights they could see were those from the Orford Ness Lighthouse, some miles away on the coast. At daybreak on the morning of 26 December, servicemen returned to a small clearing near the eastern edge of the forest and found 3 small impressions in a triangular pattern, as well as burn marks and broken branches on nearby trees. At 10:30 a.m., the local police were called out again, this time to see the impressions on the ground, which they thought could have been made by an animal. Georgina Bruni, in her book You Can't Tell the People, published a photograph of the supposed landing site taken on the morning after the first sighting. 28th December. The Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, visited the site with several servicemen in the early hours of 20th December 1980, reported as the 29th by Halt. They took radiation readings in the triangle of depressions and in the surrounding area using an AN-PDR-27, a standard U.S. military radiation survey meter. The significance of the readings they obtained is disputed. Halt recorded the events on a microcassette recorder. It was during this investigation that a flashing light was seen across the field to the east, almost in line with a farmhouse, as the witnesses had seen on the first night. The Orford Ness lighthouse is visible further to the east in the same line of sight. Later, according to Halt's memo, 3 star-like lights were seen in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south, about 10 degrees above the horizon. Halt said that the brightness of these hovered for 2 to 3 hours and seemed to beam down a stream of light from time to time. Astronomers have explained these star-like lights as bright stars. Location: Rendlesham Forest is owned by the Forestry Commission and consists of about 5.8 square miles of coniferous plantations, interspersed with broad-leaved belts, heathland and wetland areas. It is located in the county of Suffolk, about 8 miles east of the town of Ipswich. The incident occurred in the vicinity of the 2 former military bases, RAF Bentwaters, which is just to the north of the forest, and RAF Woodbridge, which extends into the forest from the west and is bounded by the forest on its northern and eastern edges. At the time, both were being used by the United States Air Force and were under the command of Wing Commander Colonel Gordon E. Williams. The base commander was Colonel Ted Conrad, and his deputy was Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Halt. The main events of the incident, including the supposed landing or landings, took place in the forest, which starts at the east end of the base runway, or around 0.3 miles to the east of the east gate of RAF Woodbridge, from where security guards first noticed mysterious lights appearing to descend into the forest. The forest extends east about 1 mile beyond East Gate, ending at a farmer's field, Capel Green, where additional events allegedly took place. Orford Ness Lighthouse, which skeptics identify as the flashing light seen off to the coast by the airman, is along the same line of sight, or about 5 miles further east of the forest's edge. At the time, it was one of the brightest lighthouses in the UK. Primary and secondary sources. The Halt Memo. The first piece of primary evidence to be made available to the public was the memorandum written by the Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Halt to the Minister of Defense, known as the Halt Memo. This was made publicly available in the United States under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act in 1983. The memorandum was dated 13 January 1981 under the title Unexplained Lights. The 2-week delay between the incident and the report might account for errors in the dates and times given. The memo was not classified in any way. Dr. David Clark, a consultant to the National Archives, has investigated the background of this memo and the reaction to it at the Ministry of Defense. His interviews with the personnel involved confirmed the cursory nature of the investigation made by the MOD and failed to find any evidence for any other reports on the incident made by the USAF or UK apart from the Halt memo. Halt has since gone on record as saying he believes that he witnessed an extraterrestrial event that was then covered up. The Halt tape. In 1984, a copy of what became known as the Halt tape was released to UFO researchers by Colonel Sam Morgan, who had by then succeeded Ted Conrad as Halt's superior. This tape chronicles Halt's investigation in the forest in real time, including taking radiation readings, the sighting of the flashing lights between trees, and the star-like object that hovered and twinkled. The tape had been transcribed by researcher Ian Ridpath, who includes a link to to an audio download and also a step-by-step analysis of the entire contents of the tape. Statements from eyewitnesses on 26 December. In 1997, Scottish researcher James Easton obtained the original witness statements made by those involved in the first night's sightings. One of the witnesses, Ed Casabank, said in his statement he figured the lights were coming from past the forest, since nothing was visible when he passed through the woody forests. He could see a glowing near the beacon light, but as we got closer we found it to be a lit up farmhouse. We got to a vantage point where he could determine what we were chasing. When he could determine that what we were chasing was only a beacon light off in the distance. Another participant, John Burroughs, also stated we could see a beacon light or a beacon going around, so we went toward it. We followed it for about 2 miles before we could see it was coming from a lighthouse. Burroughs reported a noise like a woman was screaming, and also that you could hear the farm animals making a lot of noises. Halt heard the same noises 2 nights later. Such noise could have been made by muskjack deer in the forest, which are known for their loud, shrill bark when alarmed. The Halt Affidavit. In June 2010, retired Colonel Charles Halt signed a notarized affidavit in which he again summarized what had happened, then stated he believed the event to be extraterrestrial and that it had been covered up by both the UK and the US. Contradictions between this affidavit and the facts as recorded at the time in Halt's memo and tape recording have been pointed out. In 2010, Base Commander Ted Conrad provided a statement about the incident to Clark. Conrad stated that he saw nothing that resembled Lieutenant Colonel Halt's descriptions, either in the sky or on the ground, and that we had people in position to validate Halt's narrative, but none of them could. In an interview, Conrad criticized Halt for the claims in his affidavit, saying that he should be ashamed and embarrassed by his allegation that his country and Britain both conspired to deceive their citizens over this issue. He knows better. Conrad also disputed the testimony of Sergeant Jim Penniston, who claimed to have touched an alien spacecraft. He said that he interviewed Penniston at the time and he had not mentioned any such occurrence. Conrad also suggested that the entire incident might have been a hoax. A 1983 Omni article says, Colonel Ted Conrad, the base commander, recalls 5 Air Force policemen spotted lights from what they thought was a small plane descending into the forest. 2 of the men tracked the object on foot and came upon a large tripod-mounted craft. It had no windows, but was studded with brilliant red and blue lights. Each time the man came within 50 yards of the ship, Conrad relates it levitated 6 feet in the air and backed away. They followed it for almost an hour through the woods and across the field until it took off at phenomenal speed. Acting on the reports made by his men, Colonel Conrad began his brief investigation of the incident in the morning. He went into the forest and located a triangular pattern ostensibly made by the tripod legs. He did interview 2 of the eyewitnesses and concludes, those lads saw something, but I don't know what it was. Suffolk Police Log. The Suffolk police were called to the scene on the night of the initial sighting and again on the following morning, but found nothing unusual. On the night of the initial incident, they reported that the only lights visible were from the Oxford Lighthouse. They attributed the indentations in the ground to animals. The Suffolk constabulary file on the case was released in 2005 under the UK's Freedom of Information Act and can be accessed on their website. It includes a letter dated 28 July 1999 written by Inspector Mike Topless, who notes that one of the police constables who attended the scene on the first night returned to the site in daylight in case he had missed something. There was nothing to be seen and he remains unconvinced that the occurrence was genuine, wrote Topless. The immediate area was swept by powerful light beams from a landing beacon at RAF Bentwaters and the Orfordness Lighthouse. I know from personal experience that at night in certain weather and cloud conditions, these beams were very pronounced and certainly caused strange visual effects. The Ministry of Defense file. Evidence of a substantial MOD file on the subject led to claims of a cover-up. Some interpreted this as part of a larger pattern of information suppression concerning the true nature of unidentified flying objects by both the United States and the British governments. However, when the file was released in 2001, it turned out to consist mostly of internal correspondence and responses to inquiries from the public. The lack of any in-depth investigation in the publicly released documents is consistent with the MOD's earlier statement that they never took the case seriously. Included in the released files is an explanation given by the Defense Minister, Lord Trefgarne, as to why the MOD did not investigate further. Skeptical analysis. One proposed theory is that the incident was a hoax. The BBC reported that a former US security policeman, Kevin Conn, claimed responsibility for creating strange lights in the forest by driving around in a police vehicle whose lights he had modified. However, there was no evidence that this prank took place on the nights in question. Other explanations for the incident have included a downed Soviet spy satellite, but no evidence has been produced to support this. The most widely accepted explanation is that the sightings were due to a combination of three main factors. The initial sighting at 3 a.m. on 26 December, when the airman saw something apparently descending into the forest, coincided with the appearance of a bright fireball over southern England, and such fireballs are a common source of UFO reports. The supposed landing marks were identified by police and foresters as rabbit diggings. No evidence has emerged to confirm that anything actually came down in the forest. According to witness statements from 26 December, the flashing light seen from the forest lay in the same direction as the Orfordness Lighthouse. When the eyewitnesses attempted to approach the light, they realized it was further off than they thought. One of the witnesses, Ed Cabansag, described it as a beacon of light off in the distance, while another, John Burroughs, said that it was a lighthouse. The statements from eyewitnesses on 26th December above. Timings on Colonel Halt's tape recording during his sighting on 20th December indicate that the light he saw, which lay in the same direction as the light seen 2 nights earlier, flashed every 5 seconds, which was the flash rate on the Orfordness Lighthouse. The star-like objects that Colonel Halt reported hovering low in the north and south have been identified as misinterpretation of bright stars distorted by atmospheric and optical effects, another common source of UFO reports. The brightest of them, to the south, matched the position of Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. In his 6th January 2009 Skeptoid podcast episode titled The Rendlesham Forest UFO, scientific skeptic author Brian Dunning evaluated the original eyewitness reports and audio recordings, as well as the resulting media reporting of this incident. After a lengthy analysis, Dunning concluded Colonel Halt's thoroughness was commendable, but even he can be mistaken. Without exception, everything he reported on his audio tape in his written memo has a perfectly rational and unremarkable explanation. All that remains is the tale that the men were debriefed and ordered never to mention the event, and warned that bullets are cheap. As we've all seen on television, the men talk quite freely about it, and even Colonel Halt says that to this day nobody has ever debriefed them. So this appears to be just another dramatic invention for television, perhaps from one of the men who have expanded their stories over the years. When you examine each piece of evidence separately on its own merits, you avoid the trap of pattern matching and finding correlations where none exists. The meteors had nothing to do with the lighthouse or the rabbit diggings, but when you hear all the three stories told together, it's easy to conclude, as did the airmen, that the light overhead became an alien spacecraft in the forest. Always remember, separate pieces of poor evidence don't aggregate together into a single piece of good evidence. You can stack cow pies as high as you want, but they won't turn into a bar of gold. The UFO trail. In 2005, the Forestry Commission used lottery proceeds to create a trail in Rendlesham Forest because of public interest and nicknamed it the UFO Trail. In 2014, the Forestry Service commissioned an artist to create a work which has been installed at the end of the trail. The artist states the piece is modeled after sketches that purportedly represent some versions of the UFO claimed to have been seen at Rendlesham. Change of heart. In 2010, Jenny Randles, who first reported the case in London Evening Standard in the London Evening Standard in 1981, and co-authored with the local researchers who uncovered the events, Brenda Butler and Dot Street. What was the first book on the case? In 1984, Sky Crash, A Cosmic Conspiracy, emphasized her previously expressed doubts that the incident was caused by extraterrestrial visitors, while suggesting that a UAP, an unidentified atmospheric phenomenon of unknown origin, might have caused parts of the case. She noted, while some puzzles remain, we can probably say that no unearthly craft were seen in Rendlesham Forest. We can also argue with confidence that the main focus of the events was a series of misinterpretations of everyday things encountered in less than everyday circumstances.